Today we are experiencing a disaster of epic proportions around the world. I turn on my TV screen on any given evening and I watch CNN, and I see the harrowing pictures of children drowning on the beaches of Greece, of families broken apart as they enter flimsy rubber rafts to leave Syria and Lebanon for the hope of a better life. And over the last couple of days, I've been astounded to see pictures of barbed wire, tear gas, cracked skulls, children separated from their parents as they've gone through European countries trying to find refuge. And occasionally, there's a glimpse of something that is so different from the norm during this disaster. 2 days ago, I picked up the news and I watched the story of refugees arriving in Germany. A country with a very, very checkered history when it comes to accepting others. And there in their thousands were people at a train station handing out food, blankets, toys, tents for refugees who had made it through Hungary, Austria, and had arrived in Germany. And I was left asking myself a question. Why is it so fickle when we choose who to accept and who we don't accept? How do countries determine, or individuals determine, who they will accept and why they will accept them and who they won't? So I went back to my roots as a history teacher and looked at history a little bit, and I didn't get any more clearer answers. My own country has a history of accepting wave after wave after wave of refugees. We've taken people after World War II, Greeks and Italians and Yugoslavians who didn't want to go back and farm in their war-ravaged countries. In the 60s and 70s, waves of Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees after their countries were destroyed. And yet my own country massacred thousands of its indigenous people. I look at America and its history of accepting others. The great migrations of the Irish and the Europeans in the 1800s who have came and settled in America. And yet you read of the Trail of Tears, the destruction of the Cherokee Nation as they were forcibly moved across America. So history has left me confused as I approach this topic and talk about the acceptance of others. And I start to wonder, why is it so? Is it just external events? Is it the Dow? Is it the NASDAQ? Is it the global stock exchange? Is it the forces of politics that determine how and why we accept others? Is it current political ideology that enabled intelligent men and women to create ideas like manifest destiny that have decided how we accept others? Or the Latin phrase of terra nullius, of declaring a land empty of humanity, even though humans were living there, that have determined how we accept others? Is it a series of social norms where cultures bond together and they decide to make a choice that they will or won't accept others? What has been the role of the church and other great faiths in shaping how we decide as humanity to accept others? You read the great writings of spiritual leaders, and there is so much writing about accepting of others, and yet there are so few examples of it being universally applied. I also look at today and I see a disaster happening on our doorstep. All over the world, we see the destruction of spiritual, secular monuments by fundamentalist radicals who in no way can accept even the history of others, let alone the reality of others. I visited Palmyra. I've stood in that temple that no longer exists. And it is sad and it is tragic beyond belief. But it would be wrong of us to think that ISIS haven't inherited a playbook of how to act. Travel through the countryside of Europe and you will see church ruin after church ruin after church ruin, destroyed by the religious bigots of that era because they refuse to accept others. Today we see it with satellite imagery on our coloured TV screens. But the non-acceptance or acceptance of others is something that goes way back into the history of humanity. And today, I wasn't here to give a history lesson, but I do enjoy a good history lesson, as many of you know. And I'm here today to talk about acceptance of others in our community. And what I've learned from just thinking about this talk is acceptance of others is about how we think. It's more about that than how we act. I'm privileged to work in a school that has on its walls in nearly every corridor and many a classroom a collection of statements that we call the Christ-like attitudes. And one of those is the acceptance of others. I imagine the people who put that list together could have chosen from a huge range of attitudes that they wanted our students and our faculty and our parents to understand. But one of them is the acceptance of others. This year I wrote a welcoming introduction into our high school student plan, and it talked about our community in the high school being one that has a tradition of accepting others, but one that also needs to do a little bit of work in how we create a culture of inclusion and acceptance. When I wrote those words, or quoted Chris Hewitts, who wrote some of those meaningful words, I had an image in my mind of what acceptance of others looked like. I was surprised as I put this talk together that when you Google acceptance of others, I actually saw many of those images that I had in my imagination. There were the sports teams, rivals hugging each other out at the end of a game. There were those beautiful pictures of cross-cultural teams working together. They always seem to have hands of different colours, you know, sort of working on a problem together, sitting around. There's those wonderful pictures of a Muslim woman in a hijab sharing a coffee with an Israeli man in a yarmulke. We see pictures of gay couples walking hand in hand as they go to get married down at the town hall. We see the rich helping the poor. Those images are powerful images of actions. And that's what I was thinking about. How can our school be that environment? But I've been challenged to think that it's more about thinking than about actions. Our starting point today, if we are really going to create a community that accepts others, involves us changing our thinking. I was challenged by a colleague a number of years ago, a teacher who was beloved by the students of this school. Kathy Weebush once said to me this: "We spend our time looking at the mechanics of making kids great writers, but we don't spend enough time making them great thinkers." And this was the punchline. For good thinking is the foundation of good writing. This powerful statement has stayed with me for many years, and I think it's pertinent for us as we look at our community and address the issue of accepting others. Actions will not transform this community. They will be helpful and they will be meaningful. But if we really want to change our community to be one that truly embraces the Christ-like attitude of accepting others, we need to change how we think. Universal and meaningful accepting of others starts with our thinking. This is hard. It's challenging. And it's going to make us uncomfortable. The thinking change that we need to undergo will impact every single element of our community. Our students, our parents, our faculty, our staff. But we need to take time to think. As you sit there today, I'm going to ask you a question. And I want you to think about it. Are my actions in how I treat others driven from a deep sense of spiritual, ethical values that I can universally apply to all in our community? And the key word there to me is universal. When I read that Christ-like attitude of accepting of others, it talks about everyone. Racial, gender, size, age, sexual orientation, are all a part of that universality. The teachings of those Christ-like attitudes are not for us to pick and choose who we will or won't accept. There's no sliding scale of start with the easy and ignore the hard. It's aiming at a blanket, universal acceptance of everyone, in both our thoughts and in our actions. The scripture verses that are quoted come from a guy who lived in a pretty tough time when it came to acceptance of others. You know, the Colosseum was a big thing at that time, and slavery was pretty big in the time of Jesus. And acceptance of others was not something that was easy. But not only did he challenge his followers to accept others, he actually told them where to start. He gives us the great guidance to say, start with the marginalized. Start with the poor. Start with the weak. Start with the rejects of society. That's the road we need to go down at SFS. We've started on that journey, and we need to keep going. I was curious to think about who those groups are in our school. Who are those groups of kids in our society? At SFS, we have been blessed with diversity. One of the joys of the job working here is the diverse nature of our student body and our parent body. But I must also say that with that diversity has come a double-edged sword. In my 8 years here, I've observed from time to time attitudes that we need to talk about. We have a span of wealth amongst our students, and I see that diversity as a really big positive. But I've also seen snobbery. We here at SFS have students from multiple faiths. At times I've seen judgment. We have students here at SFS from multiple national backgrounds and ethnicities. And at some times I've seen the negative side of nationalism. We have students who are diverse in our community, who identify as LGBT, and I've seen them dealt with fear. We have students of different size, and I've seen them scoffed at. We have students of different levels of intelligence, and I've seen them dealt with arrogance. It's not the norm, but it happens. And it's something that we need to boldly address if we are going to really work at accepting all. We need to stop thinking about the majority and start focusing on the minority. We need to develop a different thought process. The thought process that will lead to different actions. Actions that are not tokenistic. Actions that are not done out of a sense of reluctance. It behooves us not to interpret those actions through the lens of liberal victory and conservative defeat. The acceptance of others is universal. It's not political. It's not cultural. It's not an agenda. It's a need. It's something that we must do more than just put on posters. It's something more than we just need to talk about today. It's something that needs to start in our brain and ends up in our hands. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a challenge. I'm proud of this community and I'm a proud member of it. But we do need to pause and reflect and be courageous. We need to clarify our thinking. I hope that the acceptance of others can transform our thinking as individuals and as a community. Nations, humans, all humanity has struggled with this topic. Universal acceptance of others has not been something that we as a world can be proud of. And our community is no different. We will struggle. But struggle is the choice we must make. A few days ago, Paul Rader and I were walking in the corridors of the high school discussing a book that he was reading. And he said something to me that has just resonated with me ever since he said it. He prefaced his statement was, I'm not even sure I agree with this, but he said this. We have an old saying, treat others like you want to be treated. And that's true. That's a valuable way of looking in our community and accepting others. But Paul went on to say that the author that he was reading said this, treat others like they want to be treated. Surely this is a good spot for me to end my TED Talk, and hopefully for you to start your thinking journey. Thank you.